All at $200 won't break the world in the way most people imagine. It doesn't start with him breaking down at the gas station. It starts earlier. It begins with a truck stopped on the side of the road, with the driver realizing that this delivery might no longer pay for the trip itself. It begins with a restaurant owner opening the supplies invoice and seeing the food, packaging, and delivery go up all at once. It begins with an American mother filling up her tank before work and doing a silent calculation: gas, groceries, or credit card. This is the part that almost everyone misses. When people hear all at $200, they think of expensive gasoline. And expensive gasoline hurts. It appears on giant billboards in the street. It enters the family budget every week. It becomes headline news, a political battle, and a reason to cancel a trip. But gasoline is only the visible symptom. It's a fever. Diesel is the circulatory system. Credit is the nervous system, and expectations are fueling panic. The American economy doesn't just depend on people driving to work. It depends on millions of things being moved every day: food, medicine, parts, building materials, parcels, fertilizer, and medical equipment. Almost everything that looks local has passed through a road. Almost everything that seems simple depended on diesel. So the real question isn't just how much it costs to fill up the tank. The real question is, which invisible part of the economy breaks down first when moving anything becomes too expensive? If you want clear explanations about the economic risks hidden behind the daily headlines, subscribe. That's exactly what this channel is for. In this video, we're going to follow the price of a barrel of oil through the American economy. Not through charts, not through political rhetoric. Through real life. Let's see how a price that starts in the market affects shipping, food, small businesses, credit cards, Federal Reserve decisions, and the behavior of people who begin to act as if the future has become more expensive. Because oil at $200 isn't just a high price. It's a stress test on the entire system. The first mistake is thinking that petroleum only means gasoline. For the average consumer, this association makes sense. Gasoline is the price they see. It's the number flashing on the pump. It's the immediate, personal, and irritating cost. But the economy feels the effects of oil in a different way. She feels oil as diesel, as freight, as agriculture, as jet fuel, as plastic, as inventory, as credit risk, as expected inflation, and, above all, as fear. High gasoline prices bother consumers, but expensive diesel squeezes the entire economy. It's like thick blood circulating more slowly. The body is still alive, the shops are still open, the trucks are still running, the planes are still taking off. But everything requires more money, more time, and more risk. The American economy was built on a quiet assumption. Moving things would be cheap. Food would travel across state lines, parts would arrive on time, products would show up at your door in 2 days. Restaurants would receive constant deliveries. All at $200 challenges that assumption. And it doesn't need to stay at that price for years to cause damage. Sometimes, a few weeks are enough. Contracts are renegotiated, insurance becomes more expensive. Routes change, companies stockpile inventory, consumers cut spending before they are forced to, banks begin to see more risk. That's the difference between price and expectation. Price is what you pay today. Expectations are what you change because you're afraid of what you'll pay tomorrow. The supermarket only seems well-stocked because trucks are constantly arriving. The hospital only seems prepared because supplies arrive before they run out. The store only seems local because someone moved its products hundreds or thousands of kilometers. The restaurant only seems simple because food, drinks, packaging, gas, parts, and cleaning products arrive through the back door without the customer seeing. That's the trick of modern economics. She's hiding the transport. You see the apple on the shelf, not the road. You see the hamburger on the plate, not the refrigerated truck. You see the package on the porch, not the entire chain that put that product there. But when diesel prices skyrocket, that invisible factor starts to show up in all the prices. And that's where the low-friction model starts to break down. Low friction means things move easily. Businesses don't need to maintain huge inventories. Restaurants can shop multiple times a week. Stores can rely on fast deliveries. Consumers can expect cheap or free shipping. Small businesses can sell to distant locations without controlling trucks, warehouses, and routes. All at $200 changes that equation. Independent truck drivers feel the impact first because they operate in the space between the delivery fee and the cost of the trip. If diesel prices rise too quickly, that space disappears. He still has customers, he still has cargo, he still has work. But work is not the same thing as profit. This is one of the cruelest parts of an economic crisis. Many companies don't go bankrupt because they stop selling. They go bankrupt because they continue selling, but each sale starts to carry a loss. A restaurant can be full and still lose money. A transport company can have contracts and still have cash flow problems. A store can sell well and still discover that restocking inventory has become too expensive. The problem isn't just demand, it's the margin. And profit margin is the lifeblood of small businesses. When fuel prices rise, large companies try to negotiate. They pressure suppliers, change routes, increase prices, cut costs, and leverage economies of scale. The small company only receives the invoice. She can try to pass the increase on to the customer, but there's a limit. If she raises the price too much, the customer will leave. If she doesn't raise it, the profit margin disappears. And if the profit margin disappears for long enough, the business may look open on the outside, but it's already collapsing on the inside. That's why the first collapse doesn't look like a collapse. It seems like the delivery will be more expensive. Then, less delivery. Then, a smaller menu. Then, lower inventory. Then, the price was adjusted. Then, the employee was fired. Then, credit to the company card. Then, there was a delay in payment. Then, closing. And while this is happening, the consumer changes before breaking down. This is the second domino. People don't just react to the current price. They react to the fear that the price will continue to rise. When gasoline prices rise above a certain point, the average American doesn't wait for a government spreadsheet to decide that life has become more expensive. They feel it. He drives less. Cancel a trip. Postpone changing your car. Avoid restaurant. Buy cheaper brands. Cut the laser. Save money. Use your credit card more to get through the month. And he begins to distrust everyone. The gas station, the supermarket, the companies, the government, the central bank. Before the economy officially enters a recession, many people are already starting to live as if the recession has already arrived. This is the psychological recession. It doesn't appear first in one big indicator. It appears in small decisions repeated by millions of families. A dinner that never happens, a trip that isn't planned, a large purchase that gets postponed, a subscription has been canceled, a cheaper shopping cart, one less trip to the mall. Taken in isolation, none of this seems sufficient to bring down an economy. But that's how collective behavior works. Each person thinks they're just protecting themselves. However, when millions do it at the same time, individual protection turns into economic contraction. Before the economy runs out of oil, it runs out of confidence. And trust is more fragile than fuel, because fuel is measured in gallons. Trust is measured by how people look forward to the following month. If they believe everything will get more expensive, they act now. If they believe income won't keep up, they cut back now. If they believe interest rates will rise, they avoid debt now. If they believe their jobs may be at risk, they hold on to their money now. This is how an oil shock ceases to be just about energy and becomes about behavior. The price of a barrel is going up. Pressure appears in diesel fuel. Diesel fuel is included in the freight cost. Shipping costs are included in the price. Prices get into the consumer's head. And when it gets into your head, the crisis changes face. This is where the third domino appears, inflation, but not inflation as a number on a graph. Inflation in the real world is when a family goes to the supermarket and feels that the same old purchase has become a financial decision. It's when a company looks at its costs and no longer knows what price to charge. This is the type of inflation that oil at $200 could reignite. The Federal Reserve knows how to combat excess demand. It can raise interest rates, cool consumption, make credit more expensive, and slow down investment, but the Fed can't print diesel. It can't print ships, it cannot print refineries. And it cannot impose peace on a sea route blocked by war. expensive insurance, or fear of attack. That's the trap. If the Fed raises interest rates, it squeezes families and businesses already struggling with expensive energy. Credit card debt becomes more burdensome. Car financing gets more expensive. Small businesses lose access to cash. The risk of recession increases, but if the Fed doesn't react, inflation can get into people's heads. And when that happens, the problem stops being just about price. It becomes about expectations. Companies are raising prices before they need to. Workers are demanding higher wages. Consumers are buying before things get worse. Investors are demanding higher returns. The market is beginning to doubt the so-called soft landing. At $200 a barrel, every economic choice starts to look like a choice about which pain comes first: high interest rates, persistent inflation, tight credit, or recession. The government can release strategic reserves, subsidize energy, or pressure producers. The reserves buy time. They don't create logistics. Subsidies reduce pain in the short term, but transfer the bill, and political rhetoric doesn't move stuck barrels of oil, idle ships, or refineries at their limit. If you think something else breaks before shipping, comment below. I want to see where you think the first crack appears. And if this video is making the situation clearer, leave a like so more people can understand this chain. Now comes the practical part. Who breaks first? The first group consists of independent truck drivers and small trucking companies. They live on small differences. If the price of diesel rises quickly and the contract doesn't keep up, the trip continues, but the profit disappears. Some try to pass the cost on. Others refuse routes. Others take on debt to keep operating. The second group consists of restaurants and small businesses with low profit margins. They are hit by more expensive ingredients, more expensive packaging, more expensive energy, more expensive delivery, and more cautious customers. The restaurant doesn't need to be empty to suffer. It just needs to sell almost the same amount and profit much less. The third group consists of airlines and tourism. Fuel is one of the biggest expenses in aviation. When prices skyrocket, companies try to raise fares, cut routes, or reduce frequency. But travel is one of the first things consumers cut when they feel fear. The fourth group is agriculture and processed foods. Expensive oil enters the fields through tractors, fertilizers, irrigation, refrigerated transport, packaging, and distribution. The consumer sees the final price at the supermarket, but the pressure began long before. The fifth group is retail that relies on cheap delivery. For years, consumers have been trained to believe that fast shipping is normal and free shipping is almost a right. All at $200 challenges that fantasy. Someone pays for shipping. If it's not the customer, it's the company at the margin. Next come low-income consumers who depend on cars. For them, expensive gasoline isn't a nuisance, it's an invisible tax. The farther they live from work, the harder the bill becomes, and when the budget gets tight, the credit card becomes a bridge, but even bridges have limits. It becomes a banking problem, a consumption problem, and a confidence problem. But the most important objection remains. What if Saudi Arabia wants to lower the price but can't? What if the problem isn't a lack of oil underground, but oil trapped in the wrong place? This is the part that many people ignore. A producer may want to sell, but wanting to sell is not the same as being able to deliver. In the oil industry, geography is infrastructure. Infrastructure is trust, and trust becomes a price. If a shipping route becomes dangerous, oil doesn't have to disappear, it just has to become more difficult to move. Ships may charge more, insurance may increase. Terminals may operate with fear, refineries may not receive the right type of oil at the right time. Companies may pay more just to secure access before their competitors. This is how a physical bottleneck turns into a financial shock. The tap may be open, but if the plumbing is broken, the water won't come through. That's the difference between expensive oil due to cartel decisions and expensive oil due to a real bottleneck. When prices rise because producers withhold supply, someone can turn on the tap. They can negotiate, they can increase production, they can try to control the market. But when prices go up because ships can't pass through, insurance companies explode, terminals are threatened, or routes become unsafe, the conversation changes. It's no use saying that there is oil. The question then becomes, does it get where it needs to go, on time, and at an acceptable cost. Because the modern economy wasn't designed simply to have resources. It was designed to receive resources on time. Hospitals don't care if the product exists somewhere in the world. They need to receive it. Supermarkets don't care where the food was produced. They just need to put it on the shelf. Factories don't care if the part is on another continent. They need to assemble it today. Airlines don't care if there's fuel in theory. They need to refuel before the flight. Oil doesn't need to disappear to become dangerous. He just needs to arrive late. And when it arrives late, the system begins to reveal an uncomfortable truth. Too much efficiency is also fragility. For decades, companies have been rewarded for keeping inventory low, relying on fast deliveries, cutting redundancies, and trusting that global shipping would remain cheap and predictable. This worked very well in normal times, but in oil crisis, $200 is not normal times. In this scenario, inventory ceases to be waste and becomes protection. A nearby supplier ceases to be more expensive and becomes a guarantee. Efficiency ceases to be merely a competitive advantage and begins to compete for space with resilience. This does not mean that the American economy would collapse instantly. She's not that fragile. The United States has its own production, reserves, a deep financial market, adaptability, innovative companies, and consumers who adjust their behavior quickly. But adaptation is not painless. A family might drive less, but perhaps live far from work. A company can switch suppliers, but it might end up paying more. An airline can cut routes, but this affects smaller cities. A restaurant can reduce its menu, but it loses part of the experience that attracted customers. The country is adapting, yes, but every adaptation transfers pain somewhere else. It was the same in other collisions. In the 1970s, expensive energy helped change cars, inflation, monetary policy, and Americans' relationship with scarcity. In 2008, expensive oil emerged alongside an already strained economy, demonstrating how fuel can tighten the purse strings for families even before the financial crisis dominated the headlines. During the pandemic, the world learned another version of the same lesson. The system seems stable until the cost of moving things changes. When containers became expensive, deadlines were broken. When chips ran out, cars disappeared from dealerships. When shipping costs went up, simple products became unpredictable. Oil at $200 would do something similar, but at a more basic level. He would achieve the movement, and movement is the part of the economy that almost nobody sees until it fails. Therefore, the most significant impact would not simply be paying more for energy. It would be the demise of some assumptions. The assumption that cheap shipping is natural. The assumption that full shelves are guaranteed. The assumption that inflation was defeated. The assumption that the American consumer always continues spending. The assumption that the Fed can control everything simply by adjusting interest rates. And perhaps the biggest one of all, the assumption that modern life was built on technology, when a huge part of it still depends on moving heavy things over long distances using cheap fuel. So, if oil reaches $200, what goes bankrupt first? It's not just one thing exploding, it's a sequence. First, it breaks the promise that moving things across America would be cheap. Then, they break the margins of those who depend on this movement. Then, consumer behavior changes. Then, inflation starts to seem alive again. Then, the Federal Reserve is caught between two dilemmas, raising interest rates and risking recession, or not raising them and letting inflation creep into expectations. That's the key point. Oil at $200 wouldn't just be an energy problem. It would be a reality check for an entire economy built on cheap transportation, accessible credit, and the confidence that tomorrow will be like today. The gas pump would be the billboard of the crisis, but the driving force behind the crisis would be elsewhere. It would be non-diesel, no shipping costs, in stock. For small business owners who are unable to pass on costs. For consumers who start protecting themselves even before losing income. The bank looks at credit card debt, car financing, and business loans and starts to see more risk. And in the financial market, it became clear that perhaps the economy's soft landing wasn't so soft after all. This is the most important part. An oil crisis doesn't need to destroy the economy to change its behavior. All it takes is making millions of people believe that the future has become more expensive. Because when that happens, everyone tries to protect themselves individually. The family is cutting expenses, the company is raising the price. The truck driver refuses the route. The restaurant is reducing its menu. The airline is cutting flights. The bank is tightening credit. The investor sells risk. The government is trying to alleviate the pain. The central bank is trying to prevent the pain from turning into permanent inflation. Each decision seems rational on its own, but together, they are changing the direction of the economy. That's why the first collapse would be invisible to those who only look at the price of gasoline. The low-friction model is the one that breaks first. The idea that products can cross the country with almost no perceived cost. The idea that fast shipping can be treated as a detail. The idea that keeping inventory levels low is always smart. The idea that a small business can absorb any shock if it has enough customers. The idea is that American consumers will continue spending the same way, even when food, gasoline, rent, and credit are all tightening at the same time. That's the difference between a high price and a systemic shock. A high price hurts, a systemic shock changes decisions. And when decisions change en masse, the economy changes along with them. Now, that doesn't mean that $200 a barrel is the end of the world. The American economy adapts, she always adapts. Consumers are driving less, companies are changing suppliers. Routes are being redesigned. Domestic energy is gaining importance. Hybrid and electric vehicles are becoming more attractive. Inventory values are rising again. Efficiency is no longer just an advantage, and resilience is becoming a necessity. But adaptation isn't magic, adaptation is costly. And that cost always shows up somewhere. It appears in the supermarket price list, on the plane ticket, at the restaurant that closes earliest. Delivery is no longer free, on the heaviest credit card, in a small company that seemed healthy until it was discovered that it sold a lot but made little profit. In families who are still working, still earning a salary, still paying bills, but feel that each month requires more sacrifice to maintain the same lifestyle. That's the answer. If oil reaches $200, the first thing to break down won't be the average American's car. It's the invisible layer that allows his life to seem normal, the layer that carries food to the shelf, product delivered to your door, employee on the way to work, order directly from the factory, fuel up to the plane, credit up to the company. Trust extends to the consumer. Oil at $200 would not only make energy expensive, he would reveal how much of modern American life has been priced in for a world where moving things would remain cheap. And perhaps that's the most uncomfortable part. Modern life seems digital, light, and instantaneous. But beneath it lies a dense, physical economy dependent on roads, trucks, ships, warehouses, refineries, insurance, credit, and fuel. When this fuel becomes too expensive, the world doesn't stop all at once. It starts to creak, and the first sound doesn't come from the gas pump. It comes from the shipping. If you think something else would break first, comment below. It could be credit, airlines, banks, consumers, or monetary policy. I want to know where you think the first crack will appear. Leave a like if this video helped you understand the scenario of oil at $200 more clearly. Now watch the video that's appearing on the screen, because it explains the next piece in this economic chain.